Hello and welcome to the Craft Beer Corner. For today's beer review, we are jumping into a couple of IPAs, and these are a couple that I got from Tavour, as I have been getting the last several episodes. I keep getting great stuff. I am going to make trips to other purveyors, but I keep getting a bunch of stuff I've never had that all sound awesome. So I'm just going to keep tapping these out in the interim until I can make another big trip down to the local Total Wine, a few other bottle shops that opened up. Nonetheless, today we're going to be starting with LeVante Brewing Company. This is called Texttual Chemsitry. It's a standard IPA, clocking in at 6% ABV. They are based in West Chester, Pennsylvania, and this specific beer was brewed with a combination of Citra, Amarillo, and Barb Rogue hops. And then moving on to number two, we've got Adroit Theory's EBK. This is an Imperial IPA, clocks in at 8.3% ABV. They are based in Purcellville, Virginia, though it's worth noting that on this specific can, it does specifically say Vent Hill, Virginia. So Purcellville is up in the northwestern corner of Loudoun County, bordering West Virginia. It's the county that's directly west of Fairfax, just outside DC. Vent Hill is a little further south in a county called... They call it Fauquier, though it's French and French spelling, so Fauquier, but locals will call it Fauquier County. But Vent Hill is where this specifically says. As with all Adroit Theories, they do give a ghost number. This one's 782. And specifically on this beer, it says it is the Gashadokuro Edition, which we'll get into that when we get to the beer. But nonetheless, two IPAs, and I can't wait to jump in. I've never had either before. I've had beers from both brewers, and I love them. So let's jump right in. Starting with the LeVante Brewing Texttual Chemsitry. This one clocks in at 6% ABV. Okay, so jumping right in with the first beer of today's IPA review, we have got LeVante Brewing Company's Texttual Chemsitry. This is the standard IPA, clocks in at 6% ABV. They are based in West Chester, Pennsylvania. Three different hop varieties used in this one: Citra, Amarillo, and Barb Rogue. LeVante, I've had a few beers they've brewed on their own. I've had some beers they've done collaboratively with other brewers. But it's been a while since I've had anything they've had their hand in. So I'm very excited to jump into this. Starting off in terms of label art, it's a very clean design on here. It's got what looks like a couple of, let's just call them cell phones, smartphones, but there's a specific brand it looks like, and very clean design, looks very cool. It's got this kind of, I don't know, it almost looks like a pen over pink paper art drawing. It looks very neat, or colored, I don't know what. It looks very cool though. I like the design. I'm a big fan of neat label design. I'm an art lover, and it doesn't have to be over the top. It's just got to be good design. Never underestimate that. All right. Got that cracked. So let's get this poured right in our big old all-purpose glass, which I really do like this glass for IPAs. They tend to come out quite well in this one. It's got a good shape, and it'll hold even these big pint cans. All right. Yeah, I gave it a chance to form a head there, so I didn't quite get the whole beer in there, but that's okay. We will have time to top this off for sure. But that sure did form a great head. Visually, this is one of those IPAs that's just that textbook color I picture in my head, a light, bright golden yellow color, and it really is lovely. It looks quite active in terms of effervescence. I see a good mix of fine champagne-like carbonation bubbles that are coming up to the top in tandem with medium. So that certainly helped it form a nice, thick, creamy, lush head here. And we'll see how long it sticks if it's not so active that it collapses it from the bottom. But it looks great, so let's give it a sniff. Oh, wow, yeah. Well, that smells something fantastic. Yeah, it's got a lot of really nice, fresh hop aromas in it. Notably, I'm getting citrus, dominantly grapefruit. I'm getting some tropical fruit notes, notably kind of a mix of pineapple and papaya, and I'm getting some piney resinous notes coming in there. So it's got a really nice eclectic mix of some classic hop aroma traits, but it looks great, it smells great. Let's just jump right in and give it a sip. Oh yeah. Oh, that's nice. That's a very nice IPA. Oh, that's very well put together. Ooh, these flavors that are coming through once you swallow. I tell you, I got this really bright burst of what tastes like ripe strawberry that just opened up. Strawberry and maybe passion fruit mixed. Almost reminds me of the intensity of the passion fruit flavored runts, the little funny shaped pink ones. Those are artificial passion fruit. This is like the real thing, passion fruit mixed with strawberry though. Really, really nice. Really great flavor. That's fantastic. And it's got this nice bit of earthiness in the back and just a subtle hint of pine. The bulk of the pine really comes from the aroma on this, but kind of that pineapple aroma did translate into flavor, but it also has some unexpected, very, very pleasant and big, bold, interesting hop flavors that came through as well, obviously. I really like this. Very big, bold, pungent. It's got, I would say, it's more about the hop flavor kind of ride than it is the bitter intensity. Don't get me wrong, it's not weak, but it's not super over the top pungently bitter. I think this would be reasonably accessible for somebody just getting into the style that's trying to develop an appreciation for the bitter sensation. It's not so bonkers, but if you're a hophead, I think you'll still really enjoy it. They got a really good balance of hops in here, and it's very interesting to drink. Let's jump in for body and mouthfeel. The body's a solid medium. It's on the high end of medium. And frankly, it's much more robust than I imagined it would be for the 6% ABV. It's got some real breadth, some real presence. Honestly, it's really quite nice. The mouthfeel is not thick. Some IPAs are, some aren't. This is more along the line. I mean, it's a 6% IPA. It's not super high in the ABV range. I didn't expect that much viscosity, but it essentially feels like a standard IPA in the mouth. It's mostly flat, and there's a little bit of carbonation that happens. It's not quite as active, say, as a porter in the mouth or anything like that, but it feels right. And it has this really nice big body to go along with it. So it does have some substance. In terms of the way the flavors develop, it's really just this big burst of fruit and kind of earthiness and the subtle undertone of pine, and then the fruit really explodes forward and it starts warping in and out, and all these interesting flavors come in. So first it starts with grapefruit, and then you get this pineapple, and then you get this passion fruit rush and kind of maybe a slight suggestion of papaya, then this big burst of strawberry, and it's huge. It's huge the way the strawberry floods in here, and they all start melting together. They hold for a good few seconds, and then it starts to slowly kind of creep down. In terms of length of the finish on this, it's got a very clean finish. It's not a dry IPA finish. It's very full-bodied and wet to the end, but it doesn't have a super, super long length on the end of each sip. All of those intense fruit flavors and the little bit of pine and earthiness, they kind of get out of the way, and the bitters aren't so intense that it really helps to drag it out. At the very end, you are left with just a little underlying hint of earthy, but overall, not a super long finish. But it's fine. It's fine. Overall, this beer is really all about interesting flavors and the combinations that came out from the balance of hops, and really being paired with an excellently chosen malt bill to let the hops speak. That's kind of what I'm taking away from this beer. I'm a big fan. This is really, really delicious. It's got some of the most interesting flavors and combination of hop flavors to pop out in an IPA I've had in a while. I'm going to take my time, sip on this, come up with my scores. When we come back, we will get to the second beer, which is Adroit Theory's EBK. That's the Imperial Stout that clocks in at 8.3% ABV. Okay, so jumping right into the second beer of today's IPA review, we have got Adroit Theory's EBK. This one's an Imperial Stout, 8.3% on this one. Brewed with a blend of Citra, Simcoe, Amarillo, and Comet hops. And it specifically states on the can from Vint Hill, Virginia. So I don't know if they relocated, if they opened up another local branch. But Vint Hill is down in Fauquier, or if you're from the local area, they pronounce it Fauquier, though the word is French, F-A-U-Q-U-I-E-R, Fauquier. But it's down in Fauquier County. I know their main branch, unless they moved, is in Purcellville, which is in the northwest corner of Loudoun County. That's directly to the west of Fairfax County, the biggest county that borders Washington, D.C. But enough about the geography here. As with all Adroit Theory beers, this one does have a ghost number. This one's Ghost 782. And equally as with Adroit Theory beers, they give you food and cheese and cigar pairings. So I'm just going to read straight off the side. For food, they suggest Sichuan beef noodle soup with pickled mustard greens. That sounds awesome. Cheese, they say Nettle Metal Kunic triple cream. I bet that's awesome. And cigars, they say Plasencia Almafuerte Generacion 5 Salomon. So I'm not that big into cigars, but that's their suggested pairings. Now, in terms of label art on here, they kind of run the gamut, but they typically have some pretty interesting art. And what you'll notice on here looks like some pretty gnarly kind of skeleton, creepy looking skeleton with some headdress. And what I mentioned on the bottom where it says Gashadokuro Edition, that is exactly what the label art is kind of a nod to. Gashadokuro is a Japanese folklore or legend about these giant skeletons that snatch up and kill travelers as they're traveling across the country. So that's kind of their theme they've got going on their label art. It looks really neat. I'm a big fan. But nonetheless, let's go ahead and get this cracked gently, and we'll get this poured right in the glass. All right. Oh, nice. This is a very nice light malt bill, which always pleases me in an Imperial, so I don't expect to have the hops drowned out by heavy caramel notes coming up through the malt bill. And I like that flavor. It just drowns out hops. Hops are pungent, but they are still kind of a subtler ingredient that goes into beer where you can easily overpower them. Even the most pungent hops can be overpowered with a really rich, dense, thick, heavy malt bill. And the caramel based malts are particularly bad about letting hops speak through them. It's a delicious malt bill. I appreciate brewing with it. I brewed with them myself, but not in an IPA, not at all. Go with the lighter malts. And this is a very nice light malt bill. In fact, I would say this looks even lighter than the LeVante Texttual Chemistry we had prior. Holding it up, very light, very pale. It almost puts me in mind of a Saison. It's about that color, that light straw yellow color. It's a little bit occluded. I'd say it's not super hazy, but it's got a little cloudiness factor to it. In terms of the head, it formed very well. Very nice, creamy, thick head there. Very lush, sticking to the finger, so I'll wipe that back off. In terms of carbonation, it's hard to see through this, but what I do see is very slow moving, very small champagne-like bubbles. That's predominantly what I see in here, so it really looks great. Let's give it a sniff. Yeah. That's a nice smelling beer here. Smells very nice. Smells kind of grapefruity is the dominant aroma that I'm picking up from there. And there's a little bit of earthiness and an underlying kind of pine sense. And with the blend of hops it's got here, Citra, Simcoe, Amarillo, and Comet, I'm not surprised by that. And if you didn't recall, the hops from the first, that was Citra, Amarillo, and Barb Rogue. So we've got two shared hops between these two beers, which also always makes it interesting when you have some common ground here. Little different takes, slight deviations. One's Imperial, one's not, but they both used a lighter malt bill and two of the same hops. So we'll see how these compare and contrast. Let's jump right in. Oh, that's pungent. Oh, that's a very, very hop forward Imperial. This is very hop forward. I can tell you, it does taste bright. It does taste fruity. It does taste juicy. And what I got on the nose was dominant grapefruit. There were undertones of pine and earthiness. And what comes through in the beer is most definitely kind of a grapefruit vibe. Getting pineapple as I did in the first. So it is sharing some commonality here. There is definitely a more pine undertone that comes through in the flavor than did so in the aroma, but it's still got kind of that classic earthy hop undertone to that as well. So I'm getting bright, fresh, ripe fruit mixed with this pine and this earthiness. I'm going to jump in for another sip, explore this body and mouthfeel, and further how these flavors develop. The body's just medium, 8.3. It's an Imperial, but that's on the low end of Imperial to be certain. It's not super heavy. In fact, the body is lighter than I would anticipate even for the lower comparative ABV range of this Imperial. Mouthfeel, very, very creamy. Very, very creamy. It's got a nice natural thickness to it, and if you even slightly agitate around the palate to let the flavors coat around, it just gets ridiculously creamy. And creamy in the sense that it's more foamy. It doesn't so much get silky as foamy, creamy, foamy. Very, very nice though. The body's a little lighter than you expect. The mouthfeel's got a bit more resistance than you'd expect, and it's very creamy. So it does feel quite thick. Let me jump in again for this flavor. Right up front, you're hit immediately with citrus. It's grapefruit, maybe even a suggestion of blood orange, and there is a little pineapple in the background. And that mixes with this big pungent pine resinous flavor, and then the underlying earthy hop flavors. That's really what all comes through in terms of hop flavors, and hits you very intensely up front, and it holds for a good while. I'd say close to 10 seconds before that intensity starts to tail off. And it's a slow tail to the bell curve. In terms of the length of the finish on this, it's pretty long. It's pretty long. This is a big hop forward, hop pungent Imperial here. And it's got a good bit of bitters. It's not over the top though. It's got a good bit of bitters, more than your average Imperial. They tend to get drowned out. They have different malt bills, but this is very well put together. And I'm just getting a boatload of fresh, ripe, juicy hops in tandem with all these other delicious classic hop flavor profiles that are mixing with the well balance of that pungency there and the bitter factor. So it's really well balanced, and all these flavors you can detect independently and they meld very well together. So it's very, very pleasurable. This is a very well put together IPA for my money. I'm a big fan. I'm going to jump in for one more sip for final thoughts. Yeah, it really does have a lot of thickness. Even the body's not super heavy, it's only medium. The mouth feels very thick, it's very lush. Especially if you agitate it, it just gets even thicker. It's just so pungent. It's so hop pungent and hop forward. This is just a fantastic beer. If they had said this was a fresh hop, I would have believed it. That's how intense and fresh these flavors are. And they just hold that intensity and then it slowly steadies off. Yeah, this is a really good one. I'm going to take my time, sip on this, count my scores. When we come back, we will get both beers ranked from top to bottom. Okay, now that we've gotten to enjoy both of these beers, we're going to get them ranked, starting with the LeVante Brewing Company's Texttual Chemsitry. I like the kitschy play on words. IPA, standard of the bunch, 6% on this one. They're based out of Westchester, Pennsylvania. This one was brewed with the combination of Citra, Amarillo, and Barb Rogue hops. Starting with the aroma. The aroma on this IPA was very impressive, especially for a standard. It wasn't as good as some, but it was certainly more pronounced, and you could really smell the hops and get a good sense of what the beer was going to be about. I gave it an 8 out of 10. For the taste, I really loved this. In terms of standard IPAs, you never really know what you're going to get. Some are more hop forward, some aren't. Some are more bitter forward, somewhere aren't. But this one I think struck a good balance between hop freshness, flavor, pungency, and bitterness. And I really, really enjoyed it. I thought it only missed the mark from being the absolute top tier by 1. I gave it a 9 out of 10. For the body on this beer was incredible. For just a standard IPA at 6%, which is really just mid-tier, this thing had real substance. It gets a perfect 10 out of 10. For the mouthfeel The mouthfeel on this beer was okay. It was certainly above average, but it was a little bit off from your standard IPA. It didn't have a great bit of thickness, which some do, some don't, but it had kind of a character about it that was a little more effervescent and kind of throwing me off from being able to gauge what I was actually experiencing in terms of the feel on the palate. I still thought it was above average though. I gave it a 7 out of 10. For the finish on this beer was fine. I would say overall it was high end of average. It didn't extend for a super long time, but it wasn't super bitter pungent. But what you did get for the length that went was very nice. It gets a 6 out of 10. Head and retention, this beer nailed it. This could have been poured off of a tap. It was thick, lush, creamy. Gets a perfect 10 out of 10. For the appearance, this was one of those IPAs that looks exactly how I picture in my head when I think of an IPA. The textbook color, it gets a 10 out of 10. For the balance on this beer was exceptional. I really appreciated the lighter malt bill. The blend of hops that they chose to use was also very nice, and they brought some very interesting and very nice flavors to the forefront. I really enjoyed this beer, and really the balance was the key on this. That hop intensity, hop pungency, and the bitters, but it wasn't overboard. I think this is maybe on the high end of a more approachable IPA for the masses, but I really thought the balance was excellent. I give it a 9 out of 10. Filling in the intangible. For all of the reasons that I mentioned above in all the other categories, I really enjoyed this. I only thought it missed top tier status by 1. It gets a 9 out of 10. Finally, as an example of the style. Overall, this beer did very well. Across all of our categories, it had very high points with just a few that weren't that great. High end of average on the finish. And the mouthfeel, I would have liked to have a little less effervescence to be able to kind of discern what it was I was getting. But overall, I really enjoyed it. I thought this was a strong example of an IPA, well above average. It gets an 8 out of 10. That brings the total score on LeVante Brewing's Textual Chemistry to an 86 out of 100. So this is a well above average IPA. Certainly, if you've never had it and you can get your hands on it, I do recommend it. It had some very interesting character traits, in particular with the hop flavors. I really thought it was refreshing, and I thoroughly enjoyed this one. Moving on to beer number 2. This is the venerable Adroit Theory's EBK Gashadokuro Edition, the Imperial IPA of the bunch. 8.3% on this one. They are based in Purcellville, Virginia, though this specifically says Vent Hill, Virginia, so I think maybe they have a separate brewing op, or they moved and I'm just behind the times. Brewed with a combination of Citra, Simcoe, Amarillo, and Comet hops. So shared 2 of the common hops, and it was interesting to see how similar these were in terms of hop flavors. But starting off with the aroma on this beer, it was nice. It was above average, but it wasn't super pungent. It gets a 7 out of 10. For the taste I really enjoyed on this. Again, another one with a nice light malt bill, so there were no caramelly notes in this higher ABV to overshadow the hops. It was pure, fresh, intense hop, and a really nice bit of bitters. Really, the only thing I could say was, as always, I craved a little more bitters, especially with a nice light malt bill in an Imperial package, but I only docked 1 point. It gets a 9 out of 10. For the body on this beer was just kind of medium, maybe even low end of medium. It wasn't as robust as I expected for 8.3. 8.3 is the low end of an Imperial, but I would expect even a standard IPA with lower ABV than this to have a more robust body. It was just average, high end. It gets a 6 out of 10. For the mouthfeel on this beer was superb. It was very much classic IPA when you had it in your mouth. Then as soon as you started agitating it, all let the flavors coat, it got very thick and lush and creamy. I absolutely loved it. It gave a little more breadth to what I was missing from the weight of the body. It gets a 10 out of 10. For the finish, this beer had a very long finish. It wasn't the most bitter, it wasn't the most intense that I've ever had, and it wasn't the highest ABV for an Imperial, but overall, the pungency was there, and it really did help extend the length out quite a long time. I only docked 1 point, it gets a 9 out of 10. Head and retention, this one was just like the first beer that we sampled, poured an absolutely thick, lush, creamy head that stuck around the whole time. It gets a perfect mark, 10 out of 10. For the appearance, same thing. This was textbook, what I picture in my head, just the quintessential IPA color. It gets a 10 out of 10. For the balance on this beer was great, particularly in tandem with the hops that they chose and the malt bill that they chose. I thought it was all very good choices, and it really played its part to letting the hops speak. And I say this all the time, IPAs are a story of the hops. So if they get drowned out, if they're not as bold as they could be, you know, that's always a shame. And this did a great job. I only thought it missed the mark from being top tier by 1. It gets a 9 out of 10. Feeling in the intangible. I loved it. I did. Imperial IPAs are always a crapshoot for me. I never know what I'm going to get. I typically go for standard versus Imperial because Imperials, the malt bill, when you're building up and adding more to boost the ABV up, they often get drowned out. But this was on the lower end. 8.3 is not that high for an Imperial IPA. It's not low, but it's not high for an Imperial. And it really did the beer a boon by letting the hops come through clearly and even the bitters. Though it wasn't quite as intense as I would have liked overall, I thought they did a great job. I gave it a 9 out of 10. Finally, as an example of the style, there's many Imperials out there. I've had many of them, many. But this I would put in the top rounds for sure. I really enjoyed it. I liked the hop selection. I liked the malt bill. I liked the intensity. The only thing I could say, really, it lost some points in a few categories. I would have liked a more robust body in this ABV range. And of course, I'm always craving more bitters. But I only dock 1 point. It gets a 9 out of 10 here as well, which brings the total score on Adroit Theory's EBK Gashadokuro Edition to an 88 out of 100. So all total, a 2-point spread, an 86 and an 88. Both of these beers were fantastic. If you're a fan of IPAs, both of these are definitely worth your time seeking. I highly recommend both of them. Folks, that's today's review. As always, I do sincerely appreciate you tuning in today. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you want to stay in the loop when our videos go live to YouTube, you can just click the notification bell icon. It is right next to the subscribe button. Until next time, keep it beer, keep it craft. We'll see you on the next one. Cheers.